Welcome back to MilduraWeekly.com.au. Joining me in the studio today is Mildura Mayor Councillor Simone Clemence, and he returns for his regular Mayoral Minute. Simon, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me, Benny.
No worries. Now, it's been a big week for Mildura Council. Our most recent ordinary council meeting saw Council throw their considerable support behind a number of important planning and labour hire issues. Can you firstly just touch on the reasons why Council has now officially thrown its support behind the establishment of a Australia-wide farm visa?
So we've been talking about this for some time. A lot of councillors are very concerned about it. I've been very concerned about it. I think the fear is that when the new labour contractor licensing scheme comes in, a lot of the workforce is going to disappear, and the reason it's going to disappear is because a lot of it are people that came here legally but are working illegally. And under the licensing scheme, contractors won't be able to touch those people, and if that happens, there won't be anyone to pick the fruit, and a whole lot of farmers and a lot of the horticultural industry could quite well go under.
And it's probably worth noting, I mean, what Council has officially thrown its support behind is something that's backed by the Victorian Farmers Federation and quite a few other lobbying and industry groups.
Exactly right. The VFF have already been lobbying the federal government for this visa. Ali Cupper, our local MP, is behind it. I don't think that it's the best answer for anything long term, but we need to do something very short and sharp in the short term to shore up our farmers and make sure that they can survive for at least a few years until we can set something more permanent in place where we don't have to concern ourselves with people who are over here working illegally. But that's going to take time, and that involves things like creating accommodation, that involves bolstering schemes that are already in existence, federal schemes to bring workers in from, for example, the Pacific Islands. But that's going to take time to set up on the scale that we need. So we need something interim just to support the farmers at this point of time.
You touch on accommodation there. Two planning motions were also put forward by yourself, which was endorsed unanimously by your fellow councillors at the July meeting, and the first of which includes lobbying state government to amend the Mildura planning scheme to allow for more on-farm accommodation to be built within the farming zone, which is currently not allowed. Again, you've touched on it briefly there, but can you further explain why we need to put these things in place?
So Ali Cupper and I have been talking to a developer who built a fairly large off-farm but a farm worker accommodation resort, I think they call it. And the problem is that's great, and he's keen to have a look at whether to build something like that in Mildura, but that's going to take time, and it's going to take more than one. It's estimated there could be up to 10,000 or more illegal workers between here and Swan Hill, and if they do become illegal, they're already living 10 or 20 to a house, rented house. Some of these labour contractors have got 8 to 10 houses where they have those people. It's really not appropriate.
No.
We need some decent accommodation, particularly if we transition to a better system, and you're not going to be able to do that with one developer or two developers, and it's going to take too long. If you shotgun it out into the farm zone and give the farmers the ability to build accommodation on their blocks without destroying farmland, without taking away existing usable farmland, just something on the side of the block there that's not being used wherever, it's going to be a much quicker process, and provided you put some rules around the quality of the accommodation, it's going to work towards resolving that issue.
I think it was Councillor Milne the other night who brought up the fact, we're not talking about going back to the old Pickers Huts days,
no,
we're talking about the next phase here.
We don't want a whole lot of caravans bundled up together, and we don't want Pickers Huts. We actually want some decent accommodation for these workers, so that when the Pacific Islanders, for example, do start coming over in number, there is the quality of accommodation. I should add, it is currently legal to build on-farm accommodation, but there are a lot of very restrictive rules around it. It has to be for the farm that it's on, which restricts things right down anyway for small block farmers, and it also has to be close to amenities, which really narrows down where they can go. So we just need to loosen those rules up.
Council is also seeking a state government review of Planning Amendment C89 here. I know it's very complicated, but can you briefly just explain what you would like that review to look at and why this issue has also arisen?
Okay, so the short version of this is that C89 is an amendment to the Planning Act that is specific to Mildura, and it was a smack on the backside for Mildura Council for carving off parts of farmland for housing. And then you were getting conflicts between people living in those houses and farmers and noise and complaints and so on. And the government's very strict on protecting farming, which I am too. I'm very strict on it. But at the time they brought in C89, Amendment C89, the problem was that there were some couple of hundred, 200-300 people, I think up to that stage perhaps 600, who had already purchased properties or had properties subdivided and had blocks of land that they thought were worth perhaps $150,000. They've gone to sell them. Turns out they're only worth $3,000. Now, it's not our government's role, in my view, to financially disadvantage people through changes to planning or anything else for that matter. And there's an issue of fairness here. So I'm not asking for, let's go back to the days of carving up the farming area into housing blocks. What I'm saying is there are people that own blocks out there between 0.2 and 2 hectares that were worth good money at one stage, and a government regulation has effectively destroyed the value of those properties. And I just think it's fair that we ask the Planning Minister to review that, to put some cases to him and show him some examples of what that's done to some people, and take into consideration that early days we had 40,000 hectares of irrigated farmland. We've now got 80,000 hectares. So yeah, things have changed, and it might be a good opportunity to have a think about that and review it. And we think there's probably only a couple of hundred of those properties left now that are still in jeopardy or
in limbo.
And it would be fair. Every mayor sees these people coming into their office in tears, basically. Mark Eckel did before me, and obviously Glenn before him, and you really do feel for these people, and it would be an issue of fairness to give them an opportunity to actually do something with those properties. And if you're talking about a couple of hundred properties across the whole district, it's not going to destroy pretty much anything. Most of these small blocks aren't suitable for farming anyway now, so yeah, what have you got to lose?
That's right, yeah. And probably again worth noting, it's not the first time we've gone to the Planning Minister and he hasn't been very receptive. Hopefully this time around he can be.
Yeah, and that's true. It's been battered away a couple of times, and you just can't give up. You've got to look after the people that are hurting.
Yeah, and just finally, Mildura property owners have begun receiving their rates notices. Not something that ratepayers like to talk about, but this is the first under Council's new 4-year rating strategy. Have you had much feedback so far, and are there any messages you want to leave with ratepayers in regards to that bill? Yeah,
we've had no feedback so far. I haven't had. I did have feedback from a brother-in-law. He had an increase and he wasn't very happy, but. Look, my property's worth, well, according to the valuation, $410,000, and I got a $160,000 increase. Sorry, $160 increase.
Yeah.
That $160 is around about 5% or less, and my actual value from the previous assessment went up 5%. So the increase is actually the capital improved value. It's nothing that the council actually did. The council strategy seems to be working quite well, but what underpins that is that the capital improved value, as it rises, well then so does the rates. Then we bring the rate in a dollar down as needed, but it doesn't always marry up to be the same. But you know, some people will get small increases, but nobody knows what their rates are going to be until they get their rate notice, because every property is different.
Yeah, absolutely. Simon, thank you so much for coming in today and having a chat.
Thank you.
Be sure to tune back into milduraweekly.com.au for more videos.